This podcast could potentially have adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly the possibility of sexual content. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, Drinking with Authors fans. We have some pretty big news from your host here, Erica Lance. We are moving to change the format of the show to be one episode. So there's a few episodes that were recorded the old way that we're doing the new way, and that's what you're listening to. So thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we love having you as fans. On to the show. Welcome to Drinking with Authors. I am your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is the amazing Bo Lake, and our guest today is Carissa Turpin. Welcome.
Woo! Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking. So I am, as many can tell from the decor, I'm actually at my boyfriend's parents' house because we're having some construction done. And so I am drinking strawberry lemonade with vodka because I found that downstairs because I almost forgot we had an episode today. So I had to go and raid my in-laws' basically closet. And there's a cup because I'm in Florida that says Let's Beach. So that's what's happening there. Also didn't ask for permission for any of that, so hopefully it's all good. Okay, Bo, what are you doing?
I have a chai tea today because I got it for lunch. It's a chai tea with a shot of espresso in it.
Oh, you did it dirty. You did it dirty.
I did it dirty.
Dry. As you know, though, I will use espresso Baileys to make up my espresso shot. There we go. Alcoholizing it. I don't know if that's a word, but I just made it a word. I alcoholized the entire drink. Okay, Carissa, what are you drinking?
Well, I have a pretty tame one as well. So this is my 90s cup. It's got Animaniacs, Powerpuff Girls, all kinds of stuff. It's the cup that I use when I'm doing Doomsday Dani related stuff. And it is full of 90s appropriate high C. I actually wanted to put Surge in here. I looked everywhere for the soda Surge from 1999, but I couldn't find it. I know it is out there.
Because of the health concerns that came out from that.
Probably, yeah. It tastes like battery acid. So, it probably wouldn't be enjoyable, but it would be on brand. So
I think it was bleeding gums was the issue with that soda because it robbed you of vitamin C.
Yeah. I'm not even for a lot of issues.
I think it actually, I had a friend that had that happen and because he was drinking it all the time and he's like, my gums are bleeding. And I'm like, you go to the doctor and see if you have scurvy because scurvy is lack of vitamin C. And I'm not even kidding. He had a lack of vitamin C.
Does it like sap it out of you? Like how?
I don't, listen, I find that when we find out what's truly in some of these things, like, let's just, since we're doing this now. Let's take Starburst, for instance, right? Starburst, I love Starburst. Don't get me wrong. Big Starburst fan. But they're like little waxy squares, right?
Mm-hmm. Delicious waxy squares.
Yeah, they are delicious waxy squares. But what do we legitimately think is in this? Like, truly?
Gelatin, maybe?
But would it stay in the container for a long time and in square shape and not like there are some things and I'm not judging. I don't need candy bar hate mail. Like I get it. I'm a big fan of some, I actually used to do warheads until I put a hole in the top of my tongue from the warheads. That's the citric acid on the top of the warheads.
Yep.
You can legitimately put a hole through your skin. But there's just some stuff we maybe don't really want to open that box about what was in it and, whether or not they use Coke to get blood off a road, because believe it or not, police do use Coca-Cola if they have to get blood off of a road to clean it up because it'll eat it. So, it's weird. Anyway, digress. Oh, you have a little fur person.
Yes, I am so sorry.
They apologize.
They have seen something outside and they're all aflutter.
I've discovered I have two puppies and one of them is the greatest guard dog about things that don't need to be guarded against. Like if a sprinkler system comes on somewhere or AC turns on outside, man, he knows and he is barking at it. And like, how dare that lawnmower go off? Like if it's a human, he loves them and absolutely no guarding takes place.
Right.
if you are a pool pump and you go off in the yard, you're in for it, man.
Yeah, you're in trouble. That's the situation we got going on, unfortunately.
That's okay. I feel you on that one. Okay. So let's talk about what you write now that we've gone down several paths. What is it that you write?
Well, I have just published, as of Tuesday, my first middle grade novel. I think I've always, written for younger audiences. I am one of those people that I love YA literature more than adult literature normally. There's a lot of different schools of thought about that. A lot of people think adults should be embarrassed of their YA love. But me personally, I have a couple of English degrees. And as far as I'm concerned, there's very few classics that hold up to the Hunger Games, because I love the Hunger Games and, I'm just not embarrassed of it. So I guess as far as what I've written, I am now officially a middle grade author. So that's kind of exciting.
Woo! Okay, so what is your first official release here?
So my first novel is called Doomsday, Dani. It is a Y2K set book. I actually was talking to some of my students in 2019, right around the winter break. And they were discussing, and I'm a middle grade educator, probably didn't mention that. But I had some students in my room who were kind of, excited about the break, and they were talking, and they were discussing how weird it would be to see the year go from 2019 to 2020, to see those last two digits change. And I said, yeah, y'all weren't around, but there was a time where, all the digits changed and we thought the world was going to end. And they were just completely shocked by that information. No one had ever told them about Y2K and the Y2K bug and the predicted problems that might occur. And, my theory on that is it's because we are sort of embarrassed of, maybe getting prepared for this thing that didn't come to pass.
That is anyway, 1,000% accurate, by the way.
Yeah.
And after you're done explaining this, I think we should all discuss what we were doing at that time. But continue on.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a very interesting, every time I go places and I talk about this, people come up to me afterward and they tell me their Y2K story, where they were, what they thought was going to happen. And it's so interesting that we don't really tell younger generations about it. So I started thinking about that and I thought that's just really compelling. I want to write a book that is set in that time period. So I wrote it down in the back of my planner and set it aside, and I had all kinds of stuff going on. And then it probably wasn't 2 months later, COVID occurred. And so, I lived in Phoenix, Arizona at the time. That was a hot spot. It was very important that we stay indoors and, not go out. So while I was indoors, I started thinking about sort of the anxiety around this particular time period, COVID, and, how nervous and scared I was personally. And so then I just sat down and I wrote Doomsday Dani. So Doomsday Dani is about a middle grade aged girl who becomes fixated on a survivalist blog. She finds a blog called Professor Prepared, and it talks about how Y2K is for sure going to happen and the things that she needs to have on hand to survive. But we know as readers that this is a very unreliable source. He's always saying, hey, send me money at this address or shop on my online store. That comes from the fact that I was seeing a lot of unreliable information being shared about COVID time. And I really wanted, more so than anything, to stress to young people what it takes to evaluate a source online for trustworthiness. So Dani becomes very fixated on this blog. She becomes very super prepared for Y2K. She tries to talk to people about it, and they, of course, laugh her off. And, of course, you and I know as we read the novel that this is not going to happen. And so she's going to have to deal with the fallout and the embarrassment that will occur when this terrible disaster that she's told everyone about doesn't come to pass.
I love that. Okay. Well, because it's funny, living in a moment of, and it's true, I think there's a lot of points in history where really interesting things happen. That is not, it was serious for a lot of people. A lot of people sold their houses, moved to ranches, got bunkers, started bunkering down because people thought it was going to be the end of the world, right? And it's very hard to get that across, that it was so terrifying at that point in time. And depending on where you were, and the internet existed, but it was not nearly as big. Like our smartphones did not have news channels on our smartphones. Like it wasn't a thing. I had a flip phone, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
So like did I even have a flip phone?
Probably not. It was probably like an old ass Nokia.
Yeah, I'd say they're
I would
Nokia
like
phones.
less judgment on my cell phones right now. But I'm trying to even think if I had a cell phone or I had a pager. I don't even remember if I had a cell phone back then. But if I did, it was like from Sprint, and it was one of the original Nokias, and there wasn't a screen. You like dialed. It was like a weird, it almost looked like a walkie-talkie, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting though, because I remember exactly what happened. So I'm going to share my story. And if you guys remember what happened for yours, you can share it. But I was living in Florida, and there was this whole, the world going to end basically. So we were like, didn't kind of believe it 100%, but we're like, well, it would be dumb if we weren't even mildly prepared, right. For the situation. So we did get some bottles of water. Would never have been enough to resolve the situation, just FYI, but 8-10 gallons of water, you feel better about yourself. And then we did get a few cases of like beefaroni, right? Because and stuff. But then we had a Y2K party at my house, but it was friends of ours, and we basically got completely drunk and ended up running down my neighborhood blocks in our underwear. I mean, that's in truth what happened. If you are one of my friends that was there at that time, you know who you are, and I love you, but thank God there were not cell phone pictures and videos of people running, because we were yelling, "I am the Squid Man." That's a much longer story. But it was interesting because my friends, two of them, I didn't have a gun in my house at the time, brought guns. They brought a couple guns. It wasn't like an arsenal. They weren't semi-automatic weapons. But I think one friend brought 2 handguns, and another friend brought brought a rifle and a shotgun, and brought some ammunition. And like, I'm like, hey, put it in the closet. Like we're not like sitting there armed at the windows, but it was kind of like, okay, let's all wait and see, because we knew at midnight, 12:01 was going to be the time where everything broke if it broke. And it was so interesting because our solution, of course, was to get completely loaded. We wouldn't have armed ourselves. We were like, and we woke up, just with hangovers the next day. And maybe some embarrassed spouses. Who knows? Like, really, in the great scheme. My husband at the time did not want to partake in our Squid Man journey. So that's the reason we're divorced. Anyway.
Just because of that. That was the reason.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Because of Squid Man.
Because Squid Man. That's not the reason, but, you got to be on board with your spouse's weirdnesses. Well, what about you? What was happening for you?
I was 12 at the time. So I, being 12, was like, this is fucking stupid. I don't believe this at all. And I just like rolled through it thinking everyone was dumb because, preteen. And even now, I was talking to my husband about this the other day, and I was like, wasn't Y2K weird? Like it was this big thing, and then it was nothing. And he goes, actually, it wasn't nothing, because he's in computer security. And he was like, it was a big deal, actually. You just didn't realize because you were 12.
Well, you were 12, and they did so much on the backside. Besides the paranoia, there was a ton done on the backside, because it wasn't every computer was screwed, but legitimately they did not forward think on some computer programs for a date change. That is a true story. So none of that's hidden. But I mean, it's also, okay. We could go down a whole technical thing. I'm not doing the podcast to do that. Carissa, what were you doing during Y2K?
So I was 15. And similarly, I was not sure, I wasn't completely convinced, but I was worried about a couple of things. My dad works in IT. And so I was terrified that maybe like something would happen and he would lose his job. Also lived fairly close to a chemical weapons depot. That was just like something growing up, a weird kind of facet of my childhood. We had to practice these drills of what we would do if like the mustard gas was released and that sort of thing. Very strange. And so I was very concerned that something Y2K related would happen there and, we would all be poisoned. So I think my worries were there, but they weren't like, they were specific. And, I had a family that was very skeptical. And so there wasn't like any kind of stockpiling of supplies or anything like that. My dad went into work, close to midnight to make sure everything rolled over correctly. And I just hung out at home. I think I might have even stayed the night with my grandparents. So not a real exciting story for me, unfortunately, but just definitely a weird, interesting time.
It was, but it also makes me, you say that and it makes me think back because now I am older than you guys because I was squarely in my 20s when that happened. 27 to be exact, I think. Ooh. And I will say, like, I was around in the 80s when the AIDS epidemic happened. Mm-hmm. And we don't talk about that, not to get on a dark subject. I promise I'll touch on this lightly. But it's another big one that I can talk about that nobody talks about what the country did during that time.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's one that, they talk about it being released and stuff, but nobody talks about the ridiculous sort of fake news that was around during that time. The panic, the mayhem, it was actually a really and I grew up in Hollywood, California. So one of the sort of epicenters of this entire situation, unfortunately, we didn't have Studio 54, which makes me very sad. If there's one place I can go back to, I'd love to go to Studio 54 in its prime. Wouldn't you love to go to Studio 54?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Anyway, but it's interesting because we do approach history now instead of like actual history. We approach it very much from what is the version of the story we want to tell. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was, this time and they thought there was going to be a computer bug, but there wasn't. Okay, let's talk about 2001. Backstreet Boys, whatever.
My theory is that because of the events of September 11th that happened, the next year, that maybe that's kind of what overshadowed it. But for the most part, I think it's just, embarrassment that was something that we fixated on when obviously there were much bigger issues at play. I don't know. I have a bunch of different reasons why I think it could be not as talked about, but who's to say?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you at all. Okay, what about, what made you decide to finally publish? Was this completely a COVID thing or do you think you would have published had COVID not happened?
I think I definitely wrote it quicker because COVID was going on. I couldn't leave my house. And so that prevented me from really doing anything else but writing this book. I've always wanted to be an author. I've always, I have an MFA in creative writing. It's obviously been a career goal of mine. But I've always been a very concise writer. The things that I write are usually not long. The idea of getting to like 50,000 words for a manuscript was just kind of crazy to me. I just didn't think that was really going to be my path. So when I finished Doomsday, Dani, which I think was kind of like in the summer of 2020, I just kind of showed it to, I have a writing group that I meet with that I'm, pretty close to, and they started to look at it and I started to think, I think this is a fairly unique book and topic that I want to publish, that I want to get out there. So, I guess to answer your question, I don't know that I ever saw myself writing a middle grade novel during COVID. But, I always did want to publish in some form. I've had some shorter pieces published prior to this. I just did not think that I was the type of writer that would ever write a book. But here we are.
Hey, listeners. You know me, Eric Lance. You're just listening to me in the podcast that you had. But guess what? I'm doing something new.
Yeah, she's joining me, Mark Muncy, the author of the Erie, Florida book series in Erie, Appalachia, and we are hosting a new podcast called Erie Travels.
Woo-woo! Erie Travels, which covers things like ghosts, cryptids, weird stuff, UFOs, men in black, all kinds of fun things that people talk about, and I'm sure you've discussed with friends.
Yep. And you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platform of choice or find us at erietravels.com and join in the fun and all the spooky goodness.
And of course, Mark, what do we always say?
We'll see you on the other side.
Let's go back to you took an MFA in creative writing, but didn't think you were going to write a book. I got a little stuck on that. It might be the vodka, but I got a little stuck on that one. So what? Like, I'm just going to go with that is the question.
What?
I definitely, when I was a kid and I thought about being a writer, of course I wanted to publish like 1 million books and be a billionaire and live in a mansion. And, but when I started to write and, started to put stories together, I just had a very hard time meeting certain word counts. The things that I created were short stories, and there were people in my program who that's all they wrote were short stories. And I thought, well, maybe this is me. Maybe this is going to be my writing career, is I'm going to write and publish short stories, and I'm never going to make any money, but oh well. I read a lot of YA. I read a lot of books for younger kids, but I just felt like I was never going to have that much to say. But I think the anxiety behind COVID, I was trying to tell a group of students today how interesting, COVID is such a unique time, kind of like Y2K, in that I didn't know what my life was going to be like a week from then. Like it was just unfolding and things were just so terribly odd. So I think the uniqueness of the time with the anxiety that I felt and the emails I was getting from my students, and it was clear that they felt a great deal of anxiety as well. They had a lot of questions about what was going on. I think those two things combined to help me write it, to help me get to a book length work. And so now I feel somewhat confident that I can do it again, but who's to say, but yeah, I think I started the MFA program sure that I was going to be a novelist. But then when I started writing different pieces, I realized that wasn't my strength. However, I have written a novel and I think it's good. So it's not to say that, but I am surprised, I guess, at my own work.
So this book is very in the 90s. What did you listen to while you were writing it?
Oh gosh, I just played some Pandora top songs in 1999 kind of thing, just to kind of get inspired. I don't listen to a ton of music while I'm writing, but just to get some ideas going. And I did not remember how bad Mambo No. 5 was. I remember that was a popular song, but I heard it and I was like, oh my God, why did we love this so much? Why was this something that we loved and listened to? And, probably about the third or fourth time I heard it, I was like, well, I'm done with that. So
it's because there are trumpets in it. That's why we liked it.
I was like, I am done with this. So I guess to answer your question, I listened to lots of Mambo No. 5. As I was
just
writing.
that song.
Listen, about Mambo No. 5, before we judge too harshly, that guy put so many common names at that time in that song. So everybody's like, yeah, that's me. I remember that.
What is your favorite middle grade, book trope?
My favorite middle grade book trope. I think that my favorite trope in general is, in adult books, it would be like friends to lovers or friends to, whatever the case may be. So I think when it comes to younger readers, I love a turn in, we thought this person was the bad guy, or we thought this person was the villain. And then it becomes that they were actually maybe not even the hero, but just someone who could assist the protagonist. I think that's always going to be something I like. Doomsday Dani has a bully, but as the book goes on, we see not everything's black and white. Like maybe Dani's kind of the bully. So I love that sort of turn in, thinking a person is one thing and then, they become something else.
Mm-hmm. And breaking the expectation of the bully is going to be the bad person, whereas the other character is bullying them, so they're responding in a certain way.
Right. Just good, multifaceted, even antagonists are great in middle grade fiction.
What did your typical writing day look like?
Well, I am a teacher. So, during the school day, unfortunately, I'm at school. When I come home at, 4 p.m., sometimes I'm so exhausted that the only thing I can do is just like lay down and watch Netflix. But when I am a very productive writer, usually that takes place on evenings, weekends, and during the summer holiday. So generally what I'll do is I will set aside some time every day, maybe like an hour and a half. During COVID in particular, I made myself a very strict schedule because I could tell I was very quickly kind of like losing grip on what was reality and, because I never left the house. Yeah. So like on certain days I would write and certain days I would edit. And I think I do well when I hold myself to that kind of schedule. During the school year, it's kind of like whatever free time I can find. If I have the energy, I'm going to use that to write. During the summer, I try to be a little more scheduled and strict with it. So it just depends. But, unfortunately, teaching has become a very exhausting profession in our society since COVID. So sometimes what little energy I have to devote to other things. But for the most part, whenever I can get it in on the in the evenings or on the weekends, I'm happy with that.
Did you outline the book or did you just like go through it?
So I am like 100% not the type of person who ever wanted to use, a plotting book or anything like that. I was like, I can do it. And Doomsday Dani was actually the first time I actually used one of those books, one of those novel planning books. So I did use that and I planned it out. Not a very like strict or detailed outline, just kind of like, this is how it's going to open. This is like, the conflict in the middle, and this is how it's going to end. And so that kind of guided me a little bit. One thing that I did for this book that I think I've always kind of like blown off in previous writing projects that I've done has been the idea of creating like an image board or a mood board. I would see that all the time, that like you should create mood boards of your characters, like what you think they're like. And I would always just kind of say, I don't need to do that. But what I was finding was that my characters didn't feel as great and multifaceted as some of the books that I was reading. So when I sat down and I kind of like printed off some pictures. I don't know if you all had the Delia's catalog back in 1999, but I did. And so I just printed off some pictures of like the fashion and what people look like and how they wore their hair. And it made it a lot easier for me to create these really rich characters. So I am 100% a planner now. It worked for me, and I think I'll do that from this point forward.
That's very cool. I've never actually heard of a mood board.
Yeah.
Like you do the Pinterest boards, like to make little boards with your characters and models who look like your characters,
You know me. I'm like, I'm glad you're lucky if I type the words correctly. Like I'm doing a mood board. But I think finding author tool kind of a good idea, you know what I mean? And an amazing way to do it. So now that you've tackled this first book, like, what are you writing right now?
So I started, I actually got an idea during COVID. I watched a lot of Survivor, which, before COVID, I would have been like, absolutely not. What a terrible show. But I did start watching it, and it struck me that like the villain of reality television, those people have families at home. And so I started thinking, what would it be like if a kid, a teenager, had a parent on reality television and they had to watch that parent like sort of become the villain, and the whole country hates this particular person, but the person is nothing like that. And so I am currently working on a story where the protagonist, a young boy, his father goes on reality television. But, it's definitely moving much slower than Doomsday Dani. So that's kind of what I'm working on currently, and I hope to keep chipping away at it this summer.
No, I think that sounds like it's actually funny you say that, because I just watched a true crime show. Watch How I Take This Dark Again. I know you're going to be impressed. It was about a kid who I think it was 2007, went and killed 8 people in Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay.
And it was the parents who had never kind of talked about it, his father and his stepmother, and sort of their journey with him and the amount of guilt they feel for, you know, his family, like their responsibility in doing that. It's very interesting. And I love that you're taking this from a side that normally we'd get the book of the Doomsday Prepper. We wouldn't get the book of the family that has to survive that, or survive, you know, some ridiculousness and things like that have come up, that you are almost embarrassed for anybody who knows that person.
Right.
You know, that's interesting. Okay, Bo, sorry. I just injected that. Go ahead, continue.
I had a good question and I forgot it. Where do you do your best writing?
I think I write best in my bed, which is not a super classy answer. I do have a desk that I probably should work from. But I think sometimes when I'm like super focused and I'm in my pajamas and, you know, I haven't washed my hair in a couple days, and I write from bed. Usually that's when I do the most work because I'm comfortable and, you know, pretty serene bedroom area. So, yeah, I'd say I do my best work there.
That's very cool.
Is it on a laptop or are you like texting it on your phone?
No, it's on a laptop. I wish I like had like a very like classy journal or something that I wrote in, but yeah, it's just I got my laptop on my lap. That's pretty much it.
Very cool. Okay, so what are your goals? Now that you've actually written the book, so now you've gone past that hurdle, what are your now?
I definitely I just emailed my publisher not long ago, and I said, you know, I just got to figure out what's next. So, you know, prior to the publication of Doomsday, Dani, I was doing not a ton, but quite a bit of book promotion. One thing that I did recently was I played those top 1999 songs for my students, and I had them write down on a Post-it note like what they thought of the song. And it was just hilarious. They thought like Cher was Elton John. I don't know why they thought that, but you know, just little activities like that. It's a fun book to promote because it's set in 1999 and there's a lot of nostalgia, the Tamagotchis and the Furbies and the, you know, the various things. So now I kind of have to decide what promotion looks like with a book that is already here. I have to decide kind of like what the future of that book is going to be. And then I guess my big goal is just to follow it up with another, hopefully at some point. But I think I want to continue to write in the middle grade genre. As an educator, one of my big things has been for years, we can read books that are not by dead white men. That's like my number one prerogative as an educator. You know, there are great classic books that teachers love to teach, and there's nothing wrong with them. I'm certainly not saying that, but we live in a time of very rich and diverse young adult and middle grade books. And so I want to continue to write for young people, I think, because I know I've seen firsthand what a great book can do to a kid's attitude about reading, a book with a character that looks like them and that they can relate to. So yeah, I think I want to continue to write, and I want to continue to write for YA audiences or middle grade audiences.
That's very exciting. Have you practiced your autograph yet?
I have had 2 book signings. I had one at the school that I currently work at, and then I had one at the local library. So yeah, it looks terrible. I prior to the book coming out, my publisher sent me a bunch of like book plates, I guess they're called, to autograph and, you know, send back to her. And there were a few times where I forgot how to spell my own name. And I wasn't drinking. So I don't know really what that was about. I think that was an anxiety thing. But yeah, I guess I've gotten okay at it. Yeah. So hopefully I'll practice much more.
Do you have sayings in the books? This is our new favorite line of questioning. Sayings.
Do I have sayings in the books?
You usually should have about 3 sayings that you put in the book. Like, Bo, what's your example of one?
I don't actually do one because I'm lazy, but a lot of people will be like, happy reading, or something silly like that, like above their autograph.
Yeah, no, I always write, hope you have dreams, because I write horror stuff. Like, I'm sure you'll have nightmares, that sort of thing. And another thing you should do is date and put the place that you signed the book.
Ooh, that's good advice.
As you become very famous, then people who got these books, fame moment, like that's a big deal. But you can't prove when you got it if it's just a signature.
Right. That's really cool. I didn't think about that. I haven't been putting anything cool, any sayings. I've been saying, oh, what's your first name? And then like trying my best to spell it and get it correct, and then writing and then doing my signature. So that's something new that I'll have to start doing. There are, of course, a few that I've signed for like my grandparents that I've gotten a little personal. But for the most part, I've just addressed it to the person and signed it. So I think I need to step up my autograph game now that I've talked to you all.
I think we're launching autograph game, new heights. So, that's very cool. So you went through a publisher. How was that journey for you? Because it sounds like you found them pretty quickly.
I got the book and I thought, I think I want to publish this. I started to send it out to publishers. My wish list was to publish with a small press, so that I could be in charge of like the marketing and get say so on the cover and all that stuff. And I also wanted to publish with a women-led publishing house if I could find it. So I sent it out, definitely got a couple of rejections. I got, interestingly enough, a publisher who said that they would publish it if I moved the setting from 1999 to present day and made the like plot point COVID and not Y2K. And so, because I did want to be published so badly, I had to consider, is that something that I'm willing to do? And ultimately I decided, no, it's not. So I was lucky enough to find this particular publisher that I'm with, which is Orange Blossom Books out of Florida. And it is a woman-led, woman-run publishing house, and I've had lots of say so in how my book has been marketed and what it looks like, and so it's been a great experience so far. But I do feel very fortunate in that I was able to publish fairly quickly, and just have a great experience. Really, nothing too traumatic has happened as of yet. So it was really important to me to have those things, and I just feel very lucky.
No, I think that's fantastic. And to the publisher who wanted you to change the setting, they can go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
That's terrible. I'm on it. You know me, Bo. Like, don't the author change their setting.
It was so interesting. I just kind of said, no, I'm not. I spent a lot of time researching. I'm not going to do that. And they said, well, it would be nice if you like maybe incorporated TikTok. And I was like, no. So they're
like completely change everything.
Yeah.
And then we'll publish it. Like,
I had a friend that said maybe you should call it COVID Connie instead of Doomsday Dani. And so, but yeah, I felt good walking away from that. There were a lot of great things it seemed like about the company, but I had really committed to this Y2K thing, and I think I stuck to my guns, and I'm glad I did.
No, we're glad you did too. I'll tell you as a publisher, but also as an author, don't let people change your stories. Like, if they want to give something and you go, oh yeah, that would be something that enhances your story and you get excited about it, fine, right? But if they go, like anytime I hear they want to switch locations, they want to switch cities, don't write this in Chicago, write it in New York. Like, no, they wrote the damn book. There's nothing wrong with the book. Either you want the book. If you want somebody to write a COVID story, then go hire somebody. There's a ton of writers that you could reach out to and go, hey, write me a middle grade COVID story. And they do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they get very passionate about these things. Okay, Bo, ask a question, then I will ask the final.
If they were going to make a movie out of your book, who would play the main character?
Oh, that's a great question. I think my holdup with that question is that I don't know in many 12-year-old actresses. So it's very hard for me. If I could just pick a child from any decade and have them be 12 years old. I think I would pick, who is the girl that is now, she did a lot of stuff. I think her name is Elle, or she's in Great. She's in that show Great.
Oh, Elle Fanning?
Elle Fanning, yeah. So Doomsday Dani has like white blonde hair and some similar like features to her. So probably I would pick her. But really, I think the great thing about Dani is appearance wise, there's really nothing remarkable about her. She could be, any actress could play her. It would just have to be someone that had the depth to really show the anxiety and the stress we felt during that time. But I wish I could. Honestly, her parents, her mother and father, for her dad, I had printed a picture of Freddie Prinze Jr. Now, whether or not it was because I thought that's what her dad looked like, or I just like to look at that photo of Freddie Prinze Jr.
It's very 90s choice too.
Right. So that was kind of who I had in mind for that. But, I'm not super familiar with child actors, but she's somebody that if she were 12 years old, she would be perfect for that role.
I like it. Okay. I want to hear, as the final question, what is the best reaction you've a middle grade, your target audience for your book?
What is the best? You cut out a little. What is the best reaction?
The best reaction that you've gotten?
I had one of the most special things was that I got to have a book launch event on the day the book was published at my school with my students. And so getting to sign the books for them, getting to talk to them, I had a student who was working with another teacher a few days later, and they were creating an outline, and she asked the student, what is your favorite book? And the student said Doomsday Dani. And I thought, well, they're just saying that because I'm their teacher, but as she continued to work with her on the outline, the student kept giving her like more and more details from the book. And that's when I realized that they had very deeply read it and it had resonated with them. I visited a middle school just today. I'm from a small town in Eastern Kentucky. We actually have a Backstreet Boy. So he's like one of the only people of prominence from my area. But, other than that, Appalachian people from Eastern Kentucky, they don't often see, like people be super successful. There's a stereotype, sort of like the hillbilly, somebody with like two teeth in their whole mouth. And so getting to see someone from their hometown be successful is really important to them. So I had a student actually come to me today to talk about how she's wants to be a writer and she's writing, but sometimes she gets frustrated and she gets writer's block. So, if I continue to have interactions with students, with young people, who say things like that I'm their favorite writer, or even that, they don't even have to say that it's their favorite book, but just if that it kept them engaged, that they completed an entire book. That's really all I can ask for. And so far, so good. The students or the kids that I have read it have really enjoyed it. So pretty pleased so far.
Hello, Drinking with Authors fans. This is your host, Erica Lance. Because of the change of the format of the show, welcome to the literary briefs portion. Enjoy.
Okay, Carissa, rapid fire questions. You ready?
Okay. All right.
What is your favorite book of all time?
My favorite book of all time is probably The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Why
That's
is
my
it
favorite book too. Why?
Did you talk
Why?
about that while I was gone? Is that what?
Oh, no, we actually
No,
didn't. We
this is just
continued our Hunger
this is
Games
just another
conversation.
moment.
I guess as far as why it is my favorite book of all time, I like that the person first of all, just one very small detail. I like that the person who is telling the story is not who the book is about. I've always been kind of fascinated by that aspect of it. I also think, when you see, I come from a very poor area of the country, and you see lots of people who just want so badly to be like these self-made success stories. So I know a lot of Gatsby's. And so I think that's what connects me to it as well.
Very cool. Okay, what about your least favorite book?
I would say I've never I'm not big on self-help. I'm not big on books that I think a lot of people get a lot of good out of. And I definitely don't disparage the fact that they get, a lot of value out of those books. But I've never been a big like Brene Brown, Girl Wash Your Face or whatever all those books are. It's just not, I don't really get a lot of value out of those. I'm not sure that those are my least favorite. I think, the knee-jerk answer that I have is to say like 50 Shades of Grey, which
high five to that one, because that is a terrible piece of garbage.
Yeah. I think I perused that like when it first came out just to kind of see what all the fuss is about. And of course, hated it, thought it was terrible. But, also good for the author. She's definitely doing better financially than I am working as a teacher. So, I mean, what do I know?
And that just speaks volumes about our society, doesn't it?
Yep, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Okay. What about your favorite book to a movie or TV show? I think you already discussed it, but let's see.
Other obviously huge Hunger Games fan, love the Hunger Games, could talk all day about the Hunger Games. I really also loved The Hate U Give. Both the book and the movie I thought was really well done. So that would probably be my second book movie pairing.
Okay, what about the one you think they did a terrible job with?
Oh, definitely Percy Jackson. If you've ever seen the adaptation of the Percy Jackson movies, they're really, really bad. I also think like the Shadowhunter movies. I remember my sister and I going to see those, and we did not think those were very faithful adaptations of the book. So probably those two right off the bat.
Yeah, I didn't read Percy Jackson, so I thought the movie was cute. I did read Shadowhunters, and that movie was freaking terrible.
Oh yeah, I remember like they were trying to like have chemistry or make out or kiss or whatever, and we just laughed the whole time, which I feel like is not a good sign. So
no, I just also think they picked the wrong parts of that book to tell the story about. Like I was like, you read this and somehow picked everything that you shouldn't have been talking about.
Right.
So I don't know how you did that, but well done for completely fucking that up. So
yeah, exactly.
Okay, Bo, what are your questions?
What is your desert island book? The book you can read over and over forever with no other book.
I hate to say the Hunger Games because I feel like I've brought it up so many times. I do try to do a Hunger Games reread at least once a year. That's how much I love it. So certainly that would be at the top of my list. I also, one of my favorite books is Rainbow Rowell's Eleanor and Park. I just really love that book. So that would probably be another one that I would certainly love to have with me to read and reread. I think there are tons of books that I loved, but it just has to be a certain type of book for me to want to pick it up again. And I think those two are two that I feel that way about.
What is your, if you could be any mythological or fantastical creature, what would you be?
I think the number one answer that popped into my head is unicorn. I've always, and I know that's such a stereotypical girl answer.
It's
I've
actually
always
not for this show. You're good.
Oh, okay.
Don't get unicorn a lot.
So, I was as a kid, very into unicorns and wanted like ceramic unicorns to put in my room. And so I think there's something about them that is just very like colorful and peaceful kind of. So that would probably be the mythical animal I would pick.
Very cool. What about a favorite weird food combination?
I think my weird food combo, I don't know that I have any that are super weird. We have here in this area a certain like pop or a soda. Different people say pop or soda. I'm not sure which one is appropriate in this situation. But it's called Elate, and it's kind of like a ginger ale-y tasting drink. And people pair it with like these super hot chips called Grippos. And so sometimes when I lived in Arizona, if I felt a little homesick, I would think about this combination of this like ginger ale soda and these super hot chips. And there's just something about it that's like very home related to me. So that would probably be my weird food combo.
I like it. I've never heard of it, but I know the soda and the pop because I moved from California where they just say Coke and then they ask you what do you want. And then I went up to Wisconsin and they were like, what'd you like to drink? And I'm like, a Coke. And I waited to go. Well,
and they're like, all right.
And they walked
and then they got your Coke.
And I'm like, wait, what kind of soda do you have? And they're like, well, we have this pop and this pop. And I'm like,
That was a pop.
what is a pop? Like,
It's so weird. That's what it's always, I've always called it. And it's very strange, how different areas of the country have their own soda terminology, I guess.
very true. If you could eat lunch with any author, living or dead, who would you want to eat lunch with?
Probably Rainbow Rowell. I have been a big Rainbow Rowell fan since I read her first book. And I think, the thing that I love most about her books are the characters. And Rainbow Rowell books are the only books that I feel like I can finish and like almost miss those characters or like have a little bit of a book hangover in that I wish I got to hang out with those characters again. And I think that's something very difficult for a writer to do, and she does it so well. And it's something too, characterization, I think, is one of my biggest struggles as a writer. So I think Rainbow Rowell, just because she creates these wonderful, rich characters, and I would love to chat with her about how she does that.
Very cool. So what was it like when you first interacted with an editor?
I think
that
it was
right there, that laugh that just happened. That's what we want to hear about.
I think it was positive. The one like disagreement that comes to mind is throughout my book, I have like excerpts from this like terribly untrustworthy blogger, Professor Prepared. And so my first editor that looked at the book, she really thought that I should exclude some of those because she just felt like the kids wouldn't understand the Y2K information. And when you read Doomsday Dani, it actually opens with a definition from the Cambridge English Dictionary that defines Y2K and what it was. And that was inserted because of that conversation, that back and forth, because they truly, truly believed that young children would not be able, I don't want to go so far as to say they felt like young children could not comprehend Y2K, but they felt like it would just be this really hard alien concept for kids to kind of wrap their heads around. And, I kind of disagreed, especially given the things that kids have gone through related to COVID. And so the book does start with that. So that's probably one area where we differed. But for the most part, I have had, as someone who's gone through the MFA process and, had my work torn to shreds by my classmates. And I've got pretty thick skin when it comes to some degree of editing. But that was one particular point that I really disagreed with them on, was this sort of spoon feeding of what Y2K was to children. I really felt like, with a few artifacts throughout the book, they would get the concept, the idea. So that's really the only conflict I can think of that I had.
No, that makes sense. I mean, here's the thing. I think the first time you're super edited by, if you went through an MFA, you got edited. So you're used to having stuff ripped apart. And it's very interesting because I think editors can definitely have a view. But again, like the previous episode, you did a very good point, which is cool. I like what you're saying. However, I do not agree with you. Right. As an author, you should listen from where they're coming from. Make sure you take off all your defense shields, like lower defense shields down to 1, and then listen to what they're saying. And if it still doesn't make sense, then don't do it. Right. But you also can't go into it with defense shields of 10 and throw a big pissy fit and like, that doesn't work because they're trying to help you. It's just, unfortunately, they could have a view that doesn't agree with your view.
I agree with that. Yeah. I think, I always tell like people in writing groups that I'm working with that, you ultimately decide what feedback you take and utilize and what you don't. So I think that's really important to remember.
When did you find your tribe exactly, your writing group?
One writing group that I have, I was really fortunate. They were, one was a coworker of mine at the time, and then he was also doing the MFA program. So he said, we had graduated, and he was like, I'm writing things, but I don't know I don't have any, group that meets once a week like we used to talk about these things and discuss our writing. And so we decided to get, 2 more of our MFA alums together. And so we started a writing group that meets on Discord at least once a month, sometimes a little more regularly, depending on what's going on. I'm also really fortunate in that I had a group of coworkers at the school I'm currently at. When it was announced that I was going to publish a book, they too wanted to start a writing group. So I have a writing group that meets there about once a month. So it's been really interesting, and definitely, prior to these 2 groups, when I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, I would get on Meetup and find, writing groups that were meeting, and I would go to some of the meetings, which I think is always a super scary experience. But yeah, I would say that I'm someone who really craves having people look at my work and really getting that feedback. And, I do better as far as like writing regularly when I have a writing group that I know is going to be waiting for my work. And so, I just think it's really important for any writer, no matter what stage they're at, to have people they trust that will put eyes on their writing.
Oh, I agree 10,000%. And it's the people you can trust, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Bo, questions?
What is your least favorite genre?
My least favorite genre. I would say I have I'm not much of a romance reader, but I am not opposed to writing romance. Whereas I love fantasy. I love reading fantasy. I think fantasy novels are fantastic. And I think, fantasy authors are so talented, but I would never in my wildest dreams write a fantasy book. So when it comes to books that I read, romance, I'm not, there are a couple, obviously YA romances. I have read a few of those and really liked them. As far as being a reader, romance. As far as being a writer, fantasy, just because I think, I look at people who write fantasy and I'm like, oh my God, who's related to who and what kingdom are we in? And, I could never, if I open a book and it starts with like a family tree or a map, then I know like it's intense. So I think that is a genre I could never see myself writing, but I have all the respect in the world for people who do that.
How do you deal with writer's block?
I deal with writer's block usually by like I just have to separate myself from the work itself. When I was writing Doomsday Dani, I would get so in the weeds about being historically accurate. So, I would have my protagonist in the classroom and I would be like, what did VCRs look like in 1999? What did the television cart look like in 1999? So I would get so like frustrated with getting all these tiny details correct that sometimes I just couldn't move past them. So when that happens to me, I try to like literally take a break, separate myself, not look at it for a week. When that's really not possible, if I'm working on a deadline or like a self-imposed deadline, I just tend to maybe skip ahead and write the parts that I already know how they're going to go and I'm excited about writing them. And then I come back and fill those in later. So those are really the only 2 things I've found that really work for me.
Research superhighway. What kind of video would have it? When exactly was this movie released in 1999?
Yes. That was what I was dealing with. And then, I was always trying to get the dates correct. So if the calendar said that, December 27th was on a Tuesday, then I had to make sure it was a Tuesday in the book. So that kind of stuff, I got really in the weeds about Doomsday Dani lives in Phoenix, which doesn't observe daylight savings time. So then I knew that she would celebrate the new year later than the rest of the country. And then I was like, how am I going to handle this? So little things like that frustrate me. And then it's just like, I can't move past it. So usually when that happens, I need to take a break and step away from the piece.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of interesting how much knowledge you build on that iceberg that you then don't necessarily use, but you're like, I know all of the things. I can tell you what happened November 22nd, 1999, everywhere. I know what happened everywhere. So what did you get initial reviews before the book release? Did you have ARC readers that did reviews for you?
I did have, I guess, what would be a promo team, a couple of people who got early PDF copies of the book and then, were able to get a physical copy later on. And their reviews were that they really liked it. They thought, I think the thing that they like about it is it's about this period in time that's really not discussed very often. So right now, I think it's kind of a unique take. I actually started up a conversation with a middle grade author on Instagram, and she said she has a Y2K book in the works. So I think it's just for right now, kind of a new perspective. But I think Y2K has become very trendy, as far as like clothing is concerned and that sort of thing. I think kids are like, oh, this shirt is very Y2K, but they have no idea what that means, what they're talking about. Yeah. So I look for there to be more Y2K books in the future. If there aren't already, there could be more that I'm just unaware of. But initial reviews were that they liked it. They liked the subject matter. It is a very short book, so it tends to hold attention really well. And yeah, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback so far, which I'm really thankful for.
Very cool. Bo?
What is your Starbucks order?
So my Starbucks order is a white mocha. I always say warm for some reason when I go through. I don't think they even make mochas cold, but I'm always afraid. I get a white mocha, and then I love their pumpkin loaf. So usually I will get some of that if I am on my planning and have to eat lunch really quick before I go watch middle schoolers on the playground or grade papers or whatever the case may be.
Wow. Yeah. Actually, you can get them iced. I know this.
Oh, okay.
You can.
Yeah. Gets the iced white mochas.
Oh,
so
God.
be smart and say hot.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can end up with an iced one.
The iced one is good, but if that's not what you're looking for,
right? No, usually
like
I need something warm.
Oh my goodness. Do you finish books all the time, or will you stop and throw it away?
Have I ever not finished a book that I'm currently reading? It has to be really, really bad. I typically if I read a book in education, they're called craft books that are just about teaching and how to organize your desks. Usually I'll just go through with those and just get the information I want from those books, and then I'll dispose of them sometimes or give them to somebody else. But for the most part, when it's fiction, I do try to finish it unless it presents ideas that I disagree with on a basic level. Then of course I won't read it. But for the most part, I do try to finish one. I'm trying to think of a fiction book that I did not finish, and nothing really comes to mind. I do try to stick it out usually.
Yeah, I think you should stop doing that.
Okay.
There's only so much time in your day. You might as well not
true.
Spend it suffering,
Right. Yeah.
You've given the money. You've done what you can for the author. You're not going to write a review. So why give any more of your time and effort?
I mean, you're exactly right. And I'm sure there's a book out there that I was just I can't do this anymore. But, maybe it was 50 Shades of Grey. I don't know. I can't remember.
I didn't get more than 2 pages into that book. I didn't even buy it. I was I picked it up because everybody was talking about it. And I'm like, oh.
I read the entire thing, but only because it was a car crash that was happening in slow motion.
Yep.
And I was interested to see how the cars came together. So I was I'll read the entire thing.
Yep.
Yeah, no, there was this thing online called Honest Movie Trailers. Have you ever watched it?
Yes.
I love Honest Movie Trailers. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And he did an Honest Movie trailer of 50 Shades of Grey. But during that movie trailer, he's and here are some phrases not used in the movie, but were in the book. Like, and I think the number one that stuck out in my head was she turned red, the color of the Crimson Manifesto.
Oh, that woman's rich. You know,
She's so rich. She has so much money.
Yeah, she really is.
She can buy and sell us. Like,
yeah.
God.
So interesting.
Yeah, no, it's definitely yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that line. It's like as red as the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah.
That is so funny.
You just got to go, okay, somebody let that through editing.
Yep.
If
I was editing that book, that would have not gotten through. I'd have been like, this is stupid.
I think it's a combination of her terrible writing and whoever edited that book, I want to just slap the shit out of. And you guys published this. This was somehow okay.
They were being really, really nice to her, apparently. They must have been, because no.
Well, she did have 10,000 pre-orders, so I could understand being nice to her.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, she was a marketing person, and she did Twilight fan fiction and had all these books, so she had 10,000 pre-orders. That's when anybody got interested in her, so welcome to how that works. Okay, Bo, you get the final question.
Oh, my goodness. Is there a quote from a book or poem that sticks with you, like one you just think about all the time?
You all are going to be so annoyed with me, but in the Hunger Games, specifically in Catching Fire, there is a quote. Katniss says, she talks about all the things she's been through, and she says, the sun insists on rising, so I make myself stand. And so I think I've thought about that quote a lot. I had I went to all the, I'm sure you're not surprised, but I went to all the like movie premieres at midnight. And so I got like this cloth poster that had that quote on it. And I think in my life, you know, I have gone through a divorce and, you know, losses of various kinds. But I still always had this obligation, you know, as a teacher to my students and, you know, just as a human being to get up and put in the work to continue to live. And so that is a quote that I think about a lot. And I think about, you know, hey, the world is still spinning. So as long as it's still spinning, I've got to work through whatever it is I'm going through and get up and do my thing. So that's one that I always kind of cling to a little bit when I think about literary quotes.
That's a good literary quote.
Yeah, I love it.
So shameless self-promotion time. Where do people find you and your book?
You can find me. CarissaTurpinBooks.com is my website. I am also on Instagram at Carissa Turpin Books. And I have a Facebook page, Carissa Turpin Author. And I would love it if you would follow me there. Maybe there will be more books to follow this one. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed for you, my friend. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us.
Thank you all for having me.
This time my internet worked the whole entire time.
Yeah, it was great.
Anyway, I'm like such a rebel right now. Okay, guys. This has been Drinking with Authors, the Literary Briefs edition. I have been your host, Erica Lance. My co-host has been the amazing Bo Lake. Our guest has been Carissa Turpin. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you, and we will see you next time.